Years 2022. This is the story of a boy who had a dream in his childhood that when he grows up, he will stop crime. But time had something else in store. The boy who had a dream of stopping crime one day, he himself became a criminal. This is the story of Bryan Kohberger.
I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
That's true.
And it's real. It's true.
The person to blame is sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
What do you think about what he said about pornography?
Pornography? I've been looking at it all my life and it hasn't affected me anything.
Today we're going to break down 10 critical questions that are deeply connected to the Bryan Kohberger case. Question 1. Is Bryan Kohberger being spared the death penalty because he has autism? Question 2. Why did the judge reject the autism argument? Question 3. How did the lawyer try to reinterpret DNA evidence? Question 4. Why did the lawyer demand the trial be split into 3 parts? Question 5. Was Ann Taylor previously connected to a victim's family? Question 6. Why did the lawyer request a media gag order? Question 7. What evidence did the lawyer try to suppress in court? Question 8. What is the connection between visual snow syndrome and Bryan Kohberger's behavior? Question 9. Why did the defense demand a change in trial venue? Question 10. What is the lawyer's final claim? Is Bryan Kohberger really guilty? Let's go without wasting time. Let's break down our first question. Question 1. Is Bryan Kohberger being spared the death penalty because he has autism? Bryan Kohberger's defense team has raised a powerful emotional and psychological argument in court. They claim that Bryan suffers from ASD, which stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. Let me explain. ASD is a neurological condition that often affects individuals who face mental or developmental challenges. And Kohberger's attorney, Ann Taylor, insisted that her client falls into this category. Taylor argued that Bryan is neurologically different, meaning his behavior, reactions, and decision-making processes don't function like that of a typical person. According to her, it becomes harder to understand a person's intent when they are autistic. She presented this point to highlight that the death penalty should be reserved only for those who fully understand their actions. If Bryan's mind works differently, can we judge his actions the same way as a mentally sound individual? She referred to medical records and psychological evaluations that showed Bryan had always been socially withdrawn, over-analytical, and emotionally distant. All common traits of ASD. The defense argued that if someone's mental framework is abnormal, then they should not be judged by normal legal standards. Taylor emphasized that autism doesn't make someone violent, but it does affect their ability to grasp the consequences of their actions. She even cited prior national legal precedents where ASD was considered a mitigating factor in capital punishment cases. The defense's core strategy was clear. Even if Bryan was found guilty, his mental condition should protect him from a death sentence. They insisted that jurors must fully understand his psychological state before making a final judgment. But when the judge heard this psychological appeal, his response completely shattered the defense team's plan. Question 2. Why did the judge reject the autism argument? When Ann Taylor brought the autism argument to court, her goal was to remove the threat of a death sentence. She stated that Kohberger's emotional and mental development did not match that of a typical adult, and therefore, if he made a mistake, it couldn't be with a cold-blooded intent. But in April 2025, the Idaho court firmly rejected this idea. The judge said, autism, no matter how severe, is not classified as an intellectual disability under current legal standards. In short, having autism does not automatically qualify someone as mentally incompetent or legally protected. The judge made it clear, unless it could be proven that Kohberger lacked the capacity to understand his actions at the time of the crime, the ASD argument was invalid, and Ann Taylor's team failed to provide convincing proof of that. In fact, the court noted that Bryan is highly educated, a PhD student in criminology, involved in complex research. This suggests his cognitive level was normal or even above average. Prosecutors warned that using ASD as a defense could set a dangerous precedent. What if every smart killer starts claiming autism, they argued. What happens to justice then? The court concluded Kohberger has not demonstrated sufficient legal grounds to be excluded from capital punishment eligibility. And with that one sentence, the entire psychological strategy of the defense collapsed. And when the mental health card failed, the defense turned to the most dangerous piece of evidence: DNA. Question 3. How did the lawyer try to reinterpret DNA evidence? The most damning physical evidence against Kohberger was a knife sheath found at the crime scene. The DNA found on that sheath matched DNA recovered from trash at Kohberger's parents' home. Prosecutors called it a smoking gun. But Ann Taylor took this DNA and flipped the narrative. She argued, yes, DNA proves presence, but not guilt. That one sentence shifted the entire mood in court. She suggested the possibility of DNA contamination, either during the investigation or handling process. She even proposed that others could have been at the crime scene, or that Bryan may have had another reason for being there. To strengthen this claim, Taylor brought in forensic expert Bicker Barlow, known for challenging controversial DNA results. Barlow stated that this was touch DNA, which can often be misleading. The defense's objective: create reasonable doubt, shake the very foundation of the case. And when even DNA started to look shaky, Ann Taylor made a bold move to break the trial into 3 parts. Question 4. Why did the lawyer demand the trial be split into 3 parts? Ann Taylor made an unusual request to trifurcate the trial, meaning it would be conducted in 3 separate phases. Phase 1, decide guilt or innocence. Phase 2, determine whether it qualifies for the death penalty. Phase 3, decide final punishment. Life or death. Taylor argued that if jurors knew from the start that a death sentence was on the table, they wouldn't be able to judge fairly. Breaking the trial into parts, she said, would keep emotions in check and protect impartiality. Prosecutors called it a delaying tactic and a move to confuse the jury. But Taylor insisted it was about fairness and emotional control. Had the court accepted it, the structure, mood, and timeline of the trial would have changed drastically. But just when trial structure itself was being debated, a dark revelation emerged. Ann Taylor had a past connection with one of the victims' families. Question 5. Was Ann Taylor previously connected to a victim's family? This revelation set the media on fire. Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney, had previously represented the family of victim Kaylee Goncalves. Kaylee's father confirmed that Ann had handled civil legal matters for them in the past. To the public, this was a heartbreaking conflict of interest. How can the same lawyer defend the man accused of killing her former client's daughter? Taylor defended her position by stating that her past work had no direct connection to the murder case, so legally she could continue. But for the Goncalves family, this was a deep betrayal of trust. And when this emotional damage was made public, Taylor took another drastic step. She tried to silence the media. Question 6. Why did the lawyer request a media gag order? Ann Taylor argued that the media frenzy around the case was so intense, Kohberger couldn't get a fair trial. News outlets, YouTube channels, and Reddit forums were painting him guilty before the trial even started. She urged the court to impose a gag order, blocking anyone from publicly discussing details of the case until the trial concludes. Though it was criticized as a threat to press freedom, the court approved a limited gag order. This gave the defense some breathing room. They could now operate without constant media pressure. But once the media was silent, Taylor played another card: evidence suppression. Question 7. What evidence did the lawyer try to suppress in court? Ann Taylor filed a motion to suppress or redact certain evidence from being shown to the jury. This included Kohberger's phone data, his internet search history, and forum activity related to criminology. Her argument? These pieces of evidence might create unfair prejudice and weren't directly linked to the crime itself. But the prosecution hit back hard. They said, This evidence shows his mindset and planning, and that's crucial in a murder trial. The court allowed partial redactions, but ruled that key evidence must be shown to the jury. And just when the evidence war calmed down, the courtroom was hit with yet another psychological twist, the claim that Kohberger suffered from visual snow syndrome. Question 8. What is the connection between visual snow syndrome and Bryan Kohberger's behavior? The defense claimed Bryan suffers from a rare neurological condition called visual snow syndrome, VSS, a disorder where the patient constantly sees static-like visual noise. Taylor argued that this condition didn't just affect his vision. It caused anxiety, insomnia, and extreme social isolation. She painted a picture. This isn't a killer. This is a disturbed, misunderstood young man. But the prosecution dismissed it as another sympathy tactic, saying Bryan was mentally capable of planning and executing the crime. And when even rare health disorders didn't help, the defense made their next move, demanding a change in the trial's location. Question 9. Why did the defense demand a change in trial venue? Ann Taylor filed a motion to move the trial outside Latter County, arguing that every local resident was already biased due to massive media coverage, college protests, and community gossip. She insisted that a fair trial was impossible in a town where nearly everyone had an opinion on the case. The prosecution disagreed. They said the jury selection process would filter out biased individuals. The court hasn't made a final decision yet, but if the venue changes, it could dramatically shift the trial's dynamics. And when even the courtroom's location came into question, Taylor made one final emotional appeal. Question 10. What is the lawyer's final claim? Is Bryan Kohberger really guilty? Ann Taylor never outright declared Bryan innocent. Instead, she focused on this. There is no solid confession, no eyewitness testimony, and no conclusive evidence proving his guilt beyond doubt. She said Kohberger is a socially awkward, mentally stressed individual who loved criminology as an academic subject, not as a blueprint for murder. Taylor argued, being strange isn't a crime, being misunderstood isn't murder. In her final statement, she added, this case has doubt, and where there is doubt, there should be no death penalty. So is Bryan Kohberger a calculated killer, or is he just another misunderstood mind trapped inside the system? The jury will decide, but the whole world is watching. What do you think? Is this a fight to save a guilty man, or is it just the justice system doing its job? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.